Welcome to Muslim Apologetics Australia. In this video, we'll be discussing apostates. Should they be killed? Shouldn't they be killed? What does Islam say about that? What does Sharia law really believe? And what does the Western world believe in apostasy and apostates? Do they get treated with punishments? Well, in this video, we're going to discuss those issues. In the first part of the video, we're going to show the Islamic view. In the second part of the video, we're going to show how secularism and the atheistic Western Enlightenment also believes in a form of punishment for apostates. Many critics of Islam like to always bring this point against Islam, but watch and see how their arguments, once explained, are very premature. As you are well aware, committing treason, form of apostasy in the secular West, can get you imprisoned for life or killed. Equally, therefore, Islam, since it is not just a religion, rather a political system, applies a similar standard to protect its integrity, guiding people to the right path and eliminating any threat to that safety and security it promises for those who believe in the hereafter. Therefore, any traitor that conspires by leaving and working for another company and hindering people away from Islam will mean that they are misguiding people, which will result to people being misled to hell. What is worse, killing apostates or calling people to hell, or an apostate being responsible for you being in hell for eternity? For this reason, only apostates who are vocal and who are promoting their apostasy by inviting others to hellfire, for why there is a great consequence. Islam tries to remove any threat that may result to people going to hell for eternity. I'm certain that if a criminal terrorist group tried to promote his terrorism and invite people to join his cause, the government will do everything in their hand to execute that national threat. Because at the end of the day, that terrorist's objective is to harm himself and those who join his cause. Therefore, it is also incumbent on Islam to eliminate any promoter to eternal damnation. As you are aware, apostates have more of an influence to mislead, since they often make the claim they understand the religion more than anyone else to hinder people away. For why a strict standard is set upon them. Then again, if you're an apostate who would like to leave in secret without blowing trumpets, then by all means, there were cases of that happening where those apostates were not killed, and the proof is even in the Sunni Muslim sources. I can put a hyperlink below this video and you can see the Islamic sources where some apostates were spared even in the life of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Therefore, as secular Western systems take measures to protect its national security, therefore Islam equally takes measures to protect its people's salvation being interfered and hindered by conspirators that will make them end up in hell, which will be a very bad punishment and torture for these poor individuals. That's why Islam protects its integrity by removing the threat that claims some sort of a divine gift just because they claim they were a Muslim, and then all these non-Muslims start looking up to these ex-Muslims as if they really know what they're talking about. And that's what happens, as soon as a Muslim leaves Islam, he somehow gets a PhD in Islam, according to these Westerners, and apparently he knows exactly what he's talking about, and everything that he talks about is apparently true. Just because he was apparently a Muslim. and apparently he understands the faith. Even if he doesn't have a single credential on Islamic academics, he's still given a PhD. Now, would you, as a non-Muslim, want to be led by these false prophets, these ex-Muslims? And can you imagine you end up in hellfire and your parents do, your children do, your friends and family do? Can you imagine the consequences of that because you're misled by a person you thought had an authority? This is why Islam protects its integrity by removing those individuals that claim authority, some divine angelic authority over the Quran, and its true interpretation, where they go on to misrepresent Islam. I'm pretty sure that if you saw your parents or your friends or your family or your children or yourself end up in hell, you would be the first one to curse these people and say, why didn't God get rid of them? Now, I know what an atheist secularist will say. He'll say, oh, well, hellfire doesn't really exist. Well, what if it does? And what if you end up there? Then I'm sure it would matter, wouldn't it? It would matter to get rid of these people. And just in case you're on the presumption that, oh, look, Islam just wants to get rid of these people because it is true, what they're saying is true, that's why Islam fears them. Well, if that was true, then why doesn't Islam request the punishment of, say, Christian critics or atheist critics? How come Islam doesn't call for their killings, yet allows them to critique Islam and allows them to critique the Quran in a respectful way? Allah says in the Quran, argue with the people of the book. Why does he say argue with the people of the book? Speak better in wisdom. If it just simply feared them, why didn't it just say kill them instead of arguing with them? So the Quran actually demands to argue and debate in respectful terms. And again, the verse is posted below this video just below in the information section. So that refutes their claim that Islam can't stand up to criticism. Now, in the second part of this video, we're going to show now how secularism, the so-called Western liberalist, the Enlightenment, apparently, these people who go against apostasy, apparently, when we have a look at their laws, you'll see clear punishments even according to their own standards. Secularism punishes apostates similar to Sharia punishments of apostates. They say Sharia law punishes a person if they leave Islam and goes and accepts Christianity, for example. Let's read this law under the secular democratic constitution of Australia that teaches something similar. Quote, and I'm quoting the Australian law, Section 44 of the Constitution sets out restrictions on who can be a candidate for federal parliament. In the full details we read, 44, any person who is under any acknowledgement of allegiance, obedience or adherence to a foreign power or is subject or a citizen or entitled to the rights of privileges of a subject or citizen of a foreign power. 2. Is attainted of treason or has been convicted and is under sentence or subject to be sentenced for any offence punishable under the law of the Commonwealth or the state by imprisonment for 1 year or longer. 3. Is an undischarged bankrupt or insolvent. 5. Holds any office of profit under the Crown or any pension payable during the pleasure of the Crown of any of the revenues of the Commonwealth. 5. Has any direct or indirect pecuniary interest in any agreement with the public service of the Commonwealth otherwise than a member and in common with the other members of an incorporated company consists of more than 25 persons, shall be incapable of being chosen or sitting as a senator or a member of the House of Representatives. End quote. From the above law, if a person works for the Australian government, and notice this part, what it says in part 1 in specific, any person who is under any acknowledgement of allegiance, obedience, or adherence to a foreign power. In other words, if they work for the Australian government but wanders off and becomes obedient to another foreign power, he or she gets punished with the following. 2. Is attainted of treason or has been convicted is under sentence or subject to be sentenced for any offence punishable under the law of Commonwealth or state by imprisonment for 1 year or longer. So notice, folks, they get put in prison as a punishment for being obedient to another country. Now let's just think about all of the above and compare that to Islam and Sharia. We'll just swap around the words. We'll play semantics and we'll swap around the words and you'll see for yourself. Section 44 of the Islamic Constitution sets out restrictions on who can be a Muslim by living under a Sharia state. In full, it reads, 44, any Muslim who is under any acknowledgement of allegiance, obedience, or adheres to a different religion. 2. Is attainted of treason, apostasy, or has been convicted is under sentence or subject to be sentenced for any offence punishable under the law of Sharia being killed. In conclusion, secular democracy. If you live under a secular democratic Australian country and you work for them, you worship, believe in their laws, but have a change of mind and go work for another foreign country and worship, believe in a different law, or follow other foreign country laws, you get punished. So let's now compare that to Sharia law. If you live under a Sharia country and you work for them, you worship their laws, but have a change of mind and go work for another Christian faith or a secular faith with different laws, you get punished. The only difference is the type of punishment. Secularism, you get put in prison, sometimes even killed, while under Sharia, you may get killed. So please tell us now, folks, again, where are these secular atheists and Christians who say Islam or Sharia law punishes those who leave its faith, when in actual fact you can be punished in secular democracy for secretly leaving your attachment for your government and working for another country? So notice the double standards and hypocrisy. Now to the rebuttal section. A critic wrote, he said, so the Australian Constitution doesn't let dual nationals sit in Parliament, so what? You have comprehensively misunderstood it, by the way. My response, nor does it allow for you to go work for another foreign country in their government, while still working for your own government. If you do, you're charged with a criminal offence for adherence to another foreign power. In other words, if you work for the Australian government and become an ex-Australian by secretly wandering off and working for another, i.e. government, you get punished. Thus, the Australian Constitution does not tolerate ex-governmental official apostates. A critic in response wrote, so not being able to represent your country on grounds of loyalty is the same as being killed for leaving Islam? I'd call that mental gymnastics, but I doubt that fits your abilities. My response, it's the same. Loyalty to Islam is the same as loyalty to country. Islam is not just a way of life, it's also a political system. Thus, just like the West punishes a person for abandoning loyalty to government, so does Islam punish those who abandon the government of Islamic God. The critic wrote, still beats getting your head chopped off. My response, the point is you're still being punished for being an ex-Muslim or an ex-governmental official. Imagine if Muslims started putting all ex-Muslims in jail for 5 years to life imprisonment. You would still say that's unfair, even though your own laws also put people in prison for treason. So either way, the point I'm making, both systems punish people who are ex-member of something. Besides, I personally hold the view that the correct interpretation of Islam doesn't simply cut the head off of an apostate or an ex-Muslim, which I've given in the start of this video. And I've explained clearly that it's specifically speaking about the harsh vocal ones. So I'll just quickly paraphrase the rest of the comments because I don't want to make this a very, very long video. The secularist was trying to say that, you still get your head chopped off, you still get, you can't really compare that with prison punishment and things like that. But remember, in my initial discussion, we showed that, the West still remove the national threat, not just by imprisonment, but actually killing that person as well, if he's actually harming the actual state. And we showed in the beginning of this discussion article that it is a crime. Once you're calling people to hellfire, once you're inviting them to be tortured and killed in hellfire, you're advocating violence. You're trying to harm those people with misguidance. So I don't see how that's any different by using a method to, kill and remove that national threat, because, if you followed that national threat, then you would end up in a very bad place and get killed for that. You'll get tortured and so forth. So you don't want to get yourself harmed. And because of that consequence, you obviously would remove that national threat, just like secularists would try and remove and kill terrorists who try and harm the state. A critic actually wrote to me and he said, would you kill an apostate if you were asked to do so? And my response is only if his apostasy had to do with advocating violence, i.e. him being an open advocacy to call to hellfire. And it wouldn't be up to me to kill him, obviously. It's up to the military service, up to the Sharia police within a Islamic constitution. You can't just take your hands, in your own. You can't take the matter in your own hands and go out and start, killing people in the street. This is not the way to do it. It goes in front of a judge and jury, and it gets sorted out in a Sharia court system. It's not something that an individual does. And my question to him was, to the critic in response, I said, may I ask you a similar question? If you worked for the police force, would you arrest an ex-governmental official found secretly working for a foreign government? Would you arrest him and put him in jail? So the way Islam is understood is that it kills apostates if the apostates advocate violence, in the same way Westerners may kill ex-government officials who advocate violence, not just working with another foreign power. I understand if you only work with a foreign power, you get jail time. However, if they advocate violence, then our Western court systems would even drone strike and try and kill them. That's our understanding, even how Islam works. And then in the end, in the conclusion part, a critic actually wrote, if a government official leaves the government, he's talking about the Western system, he says, if a government official leaves the government and then criticizes it and tries to remove them from power, we don't give them jail time or he'll kill them. He says we call that democracy. My response to him, we are talking about government officials who leave to go for work to a separate foreign power, not working for a separate party under the same governmental body. So the critic completely misconstrued our point when we said working for another governmental party, not within the same body. And then in the end, the critic wrote, certainly though, if someone advocates violence in the UK, they would be charged and be convicted to go to jail. And if you came to this country and said you would be willing to kill apostates, that is exactly what would happen to you. And my response to him is, if you go to North Korea to kill an ex-American official as an ex-government apostate, I'm sure too the North Koreans will arrest you and kill you for it as well. So in conclusion, folks, what have we learned? We've learned that in secular law, in the Western systems, working for another foreign power while being loyal to your own government and secretly working for another agent, or even openly leaving and working for another agent of another foreign power, you can be punished for it. And if you even advocate violence, you could be killed for it. So how is that different from Islam, where in Islam you're a Muslim, you believe in the laws of Islam, you believe in Allah and the rules and the regulations, then you leave it, you go work for another foreign religion, and then you actually say that that religion is false, and you're basically now, a spokesperson for that ex-representation of that religion. You put yourself on a pedestal as if you're some sort of an authority, and you start misguiding people, which actually advocates violence because it sends people to hell, which means you're advocating violence against the law of Allah and harming society and the rest of the people, because they'll end up in hell. So again, Islam deals with those advocating violence the same way the Westerners deal with, people who commit treason in the same way, by working for another foreign power, and they may advocate violence in the same way. You could be punished for it and you could be killed for it. So it's no different from Islam. Now, in conclusion, this is a really interesting one, folks. In a secular government, sharing even classified information with even a businessman of a foreign country gets you even sacked. You lose your job. You can see here, this is Sami Dastari, as you know, has formally resigned as the opposition deputy over accusations he passed classified information onto a Communist Party of China. Now, just imagine, folks, now if Sharia law forced an imam or a khalifa to resign simply for talking to a non-Muslim foreign country about classified Sharia intelligence. Non-Muslims would say this is the intolerance of Islam and how it systematically oppresses its own followers to confine to its own cult-like religion. But then when secularists limit the freedom, speech and the movement of classified information of their own, and they start sacking people and banning people from politics and working for the government, it suddenly becomes a different standard. Hypocrisy at its very best.